Farmers have really hard jobs even if they have a lot of modern tools that help them, but it's still a tough job. It's hard to imagine how difficult it was long ago, but there are some tools that have been around for years. Let's get into these farming tools that have helped farmers for centuries. Tractors. This might be really surprising, but tractors have been around for almost 200 years. Now, obviously they didn't exactly look like the beast that we have around today, but they were a game changer even back then. Before that, most things had to be done with animals or by hand, but the tractor would make life so much easier for the farmers that were around back then. They were able to start pulling all sorts of tools to help them get their jobs done faster. In the early 19th century, there was a lot of progress being made with steam engines on wheels. This led to the creation of what would be the first tractor. Then in the 1900s, they started to move the tractor over to a gasoline engine that started to look more like the tractors that we know today. These tractors were super heavy, so they were hard to use in many places and in many situations. Plus, effect from soil compaction was massive. Then many different companies started to get involved, and by 1922, there were more than 100 companies who were all working to make tractors mostly for farms. These tractors still had steel wheels, and when rubber wheels started to become more mainstream, the farmers were worried that switching from steel to rubber would have a negative impact on productivity. They didn't know if these rubber wheels would work as well and if they'd be able to work as fast as they used to. But of course they did, and as the evolution of tractors progressed with better systems, higher horsepower, and better gear, the farmers started to rely on tractors more and more. Eventually, they even started to focus on the comfort of the operator too. John Deere started to make tractors that could protect the operator from the hazards of working a tractor. Now, there are tractors that have better cabs than some cars have seats. They have everything from temperature control to comfortable seating and anything else the farmer could need. Technology has advanced so much, and there are now specialized tractors for any need that a farmer could have. They can even give you accurate information about the tools they're using to plant or produce. It's pretty amazing. Tractors are probably one of the biggest forms of help that a farmer has, and many different studies have shown that they're responsible for massive growths in farming. Farmers are able to now farm much bigger pieces of land than they were able to do without a tractor. They're also able to farm much faster and produce a lot more on the same size of land than they did when they were farming by hand. The tractor is for sure an incredibly helpful tool that's been around for many years. The plow. The plow is a tool that has one or more blades that are heavy enough to break the soil and to cut a small ditch into the ground for planting seeds. Today, most farmers can drag a massive plow behind their tractors and do large pieces of field at once. But the plow has been a help to farmers for centuries, as in they have used plows all the way back to ancient times. During that time, many people had to farm for their food, and they had to work really hard to feed their families and those around them. Farmers back then obviously didn't have anywhere near the technology that we have now. They were smart. They created tools that helped to make the work easier for them. And sometimes they were more successful in making these tools than many of those in more modern times were. Some believe that the plows that were used in ancient Roman times were better pieces of equipment than farmers had in America around the time of George Washington. That could be true, but since the time of Washington, we have come a far way when it comes to technology and equipment for farming. Since much of the principles on how plows are made have remained the same from ancient times to now, in ancient Egypt, they used some animals to pull a plow, but they preferred using a hand plow that was made out of wood and bronze. These had a long handle that was tipped with the plow instrument that farmers could use to turn their soil. The first plow in America weren't much better. They were basically just crooked sticks that had some iron points attached to them to shuffle the soil. But they couldn't go very deep, and most of the success of these plows depended on the strength of the oxen or horses that were pulling them. Most of them needed quite a few men and animals to pull them to get a furrow pulled when the ground was really hard. Later on, many different men worked on better designs for a plow, and pieces of their ideas were all brought together to create the plow that farmers use today. These newer plows could dig deep into even the hardest of soil, and they made the work much easier on the farmers and the animals they were using. Eventually, there were even plows that allowed the man to be able to ride on the plow while the animals were getting the job done instead of pulling with them or pushing behind them. Then eventually they replaced the animals pulling the plow with tractors that could work much faster. And later on, they started designing plows that didn't dig as deep. Some farmers use a more minimal tillage system today. This helps combat soil erosion, and it helps to conserve moisture in the soil. But when they need the trusty plow, one is always around, and they can use it much easier than the farmers of old. Milking machines. For years, farmers used their hands to milk their cows, and that is still fine to use today if you only have a small number of animals. But if you're a big dairy farmer farmer with hundreds of animals, this process can take all day, even with many people doing the work. By the time you have finished milking all the cows, it could be time to start right up doing it all over again. But surprisingly, there have been machines that have been around to help farmers get the milking done for over 100 years. It was as far back as the early 1800s that farmers started to search for ways to get the work done faster, allowing them to keep more animals. In the beginning, someone invented a machine that would just keep suction on the teat without allowing it to fill up again. Very few farmers wanted to use it since many vets said that it could hurt the animals and damage their udders. Then in 1895, they invented a machine that did start and stop called the pulsator milking machine, and later on the surge milker that had a motion that was very similar to the calf drinking from its mother. This helped to ensure that the animal was not injured in the process and that farmers could work a lot faster than they have in the past. From then on, the technology just got better, with better ways to attach the machine to the cow being invented and easier ways to clean the cow's udder, and just generally making the process quicker for the farmers and their animals. Grain elevator. This is another invention that seems like it should be really modern, but in reality, it's been around for many years. For most grain farmers, their grain elevators are one of their most important tools to help them store and move grain much faster than they could without the elevator. It's pretty much one of the integral parts of the farm for grain farmers who farm massive amounts of grain. It was invented all the way back in 1842, and it has completely changed how farmers process their grains. But surprisingly, it's been around to help the farmers for more than a century. The seed drill. In ancient times, there was really no way to precisely plant seeds to know that you have left enough space between each and given your crops the best advantage to grow. The best way to do this was by planting each seed individually, and that would take a seriously long time. So the norm was that you would just scatter seeds in the field and hope to get the best yield you can possibly get. This resulted in loads of plants growing closely together and being unable to live up to the time of the harvest. This is why in 1701, Jethro Tull started to look into ways that you could plant seeds in perfect rows with perfect spacing. What he came up with was the seed drill. Now at the time he only had one row and could shape the ground. The ground then had the cylinder, a funnel, and hopper, and it could lay the seeds down perfectly and then cover them up. It was much quicker than planting seeds individually, but it was still pretty slow. Still, it was a tool that farmers used for centuries, right up to the development of the modern seed drill that is seriously precise and that can now lay up to 12 rows of seeds. Plus, it doesn't just plant the seeds, it also fertilizes them as they plant. It's pretty awesome. Farmers have been using these tools for centuries, but we still find ways to improve them regularly. Thanks for watching.